There's a man standing at the edge of a wheat field at dawn, his calloused hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that's gone cold. He's been up since 3 in the morning, and he'll work until the sun disappears behind the horizon. His neighbors think he's crazy. His family wonders why he pushes himself so hard when he could easily settle for what he has. But this man sees something they don't see. He sees acres of golden grain where others see just dirt and endless work. What separates this farmer from his neighbors isn't luck, isn't talent, isn't even opportunity. It's his willingness to pay a price that others simply won't pay. And that, my friends, is the great dividing line that runs through every human life. On one side stand those who dream. On the other side stand those who sacrifice for their dreams. You see, we live in a world that sells us fairy tales. We're told that success comes to those who want it badly enough, that if we just believe hard enough, visualize clearly enough, everything will fall into place. But believing without sacrificing is like planting seeds without water. The dreams remain buried, waiting for something that never comes. The truth that nobody wants to whisper is this: big goals don't care about your comfort. They don't care about your weekend plans, your favorite television shows, or your desire to sleep in on Sunday morning. Big goals are jealous masters. They demand everything and promise nothing in return except the possibility, just the possibility, that you might become the person capable of achieving them. Think about the mother who decides to return to school after 20 years of raising children. She doesn't just sacrifice her evenings to textbooks and assignments. She sacrifices the luxury of ignorance, the comfortable assumption that her current skills are enough. She faces the humbling reality of being a beginner again, sitting in classrooms surrounded by people half her age, struggling with concepts that come naturally to minds unencumbered by decades of thinking in familiar patterns. Every night, while her friends are watching their favorite shows or relaxing with a glass of wine, she's hunched over a desk, her eyes burning from strain, her mind wrestling with ideas that challenge everything she thought she knew about herself. She sacrifices not just time, but comfort. Not just leisure, but the easy acceptance of who she was yesterday. The sacrifice isn't just in what she gives up. It's in what she must become. She must sacrifice the version of herself that says, "I'm too old to learn," the voice that whispers, "What if I fail?" She must sacrifice the comfortable identity of someone who has already figured out her place in the world. And here's what makes sacrifice so difficult. It's not dramatic. It's not the stuff of movies where someone makes one grand gesture and transforms their life forever. Real sacrifice is quiet. It's choosing to wake up 30 minutes earlier every single day for 5 years. It's saying no to the invitation again. It's opening a book when your brain feels like cotton and your body aches from the day's work. Consider the craftsman who decides he won't settle for being merely competent. While others in his trade are content to do the job well enough, he stays after hours, perfecting techniques that no one will notice. He studies methods that masters used generations ago, techniques that take years to develop and may never directly increase his income. His fellow workers think he's wasting his time. His wife wonders why he can't just come home and be satisfied with a job well done. But he understands something they don't. Excellence isn't achieved by doing more of what everyone else is doing. It's achieved by doing what others won't do, long after others have stopped trying. He sacrifices the approval of his peers, the comfort of fitting in, the ease of meeting expectations rather than exceeding them. The sacrifice cuts deeper than time and energy. It cuts into identity itself. When you commit to a goal that requires you to become more than you currently are, you must be willing to sacrifice who you currently are. You must be willing to let parts of yourself die so that a better version can be born. This is why most people settle. Not because they lack dreams, but because they're unwilling to sacrifice the familiar for the possibility of something greater. They want the mountain peak, but they won't give up base camp. They want the view from the top, but they won't sacrifice the comfortable valley where they've built their lives. What are you clinging to that's keeping you from climbing higher? Here's what nobody tells you about sacrifice. It doesn't feel noble when you're living it. It feels like loss. It feels like you're giving up pieces of yourself for something that may never come. The carpenter who spends his evenings learning new joinery techniques while his friends are at the local pub doesn't feel like a hero. He feels tired. He feels alone. He questions whether the intricate dovetail joints he's perfecting will ever matter to anyone. But that's exactly the point. True sacrifice isn't heroic in the moment. It's mundane. It's choosing the difficult path when no one is watching, when there's no applause, when there's no guarantee that anyone will ever notice or care about the extra effort you're putting in. Look at the woman who decides to save every penny for 10 years to open her own bakery. She doesn't sacrifice just money. She sacrifices the new dress, the vacation her friends take, the restaurant meals that would bring momentary pleasure. But deeper than that, she sacrifices the voice in her head that says, "You deserve to enjoy life now. Why wait for some uncertain future?" Every time she passes the shop window displaying something beautiful she can't afford, every time she declines an invitation because it would strain her budget, every time she eats another simple meal at home while others are enjoying elaborate dinners out, she's making a choice. She's choosing her future self over her present self. This is the sacrifice that really matters. Not the dramatic gesture, but the daily decision to delay gratification, to invest in tomorrow's possibility rather than today's pleasure, to believe in a version of yourself that doesn't yet exist strongly enough to disappoint the version that does. Think about the young man who works 2 jobs to put himself through college. His friends from high school are out every weekend, living what looks like the good life. They have money to spend, time to waste, freedom to follow every impulse. Meanwhile, he's stocking shelves at midnight, his back aching, his mind foggy from exhaustion, studying between customers during the quiet hours. He sacrifices the easy camaraderie of his peers. He sacrifices the luxury of being young and careless. He sacrifices the right to complain about being tired because he chose this path. Nobody forced him to carry textbooks in his back pocket at work, to study during his lunch breaks, to fall asleep over homework at 2 in the morning. But here's what his friends don't understand. He's not sacrificing his youth, he's investing it. Every hour he spends now doing what they won't do is an hour that will pay dividends for decades. While they're living in the immediate gratification of the moment, he's building a foundation for a lifetime of possibilities. The hardest part isn't the physical sacrifice. It's the emotional sacrifice. It's sacrificing the need to be understood. When you choose a path that requires genuine sacrifice, you often walk it alone. People don't understand why you won't settle for good enough. They don't understand why you keep pushing when you've already achieved more than most. They think you're never satisfied, that you don't know how to be happy. What they don't realize is that you've discovered something they haven't, the deep satisfaction that comes not from reaching a destination, but from becoming the kind of person who's capable of making the journey. The goal isn't just to achieve something external. The goal is to forge yourself into someone worthy of the achievement. Consider the farmer we met earlier, standing in his field at dawn. His sacrifice isn't just the early morning hours or the back-breaking work. His deepest sacrifice is the comfort of mediocrity. He could farm just enough to get by, like his neighbors. He could accept average yields, average quality, average prices. He could spend his evenings relaxing instead of reading about soil composition and weather patterns. But he sacrificed the right to blame anyone else for his results. When you aim for excellence, you sacrifice the luxury of excuses. You sacrifice the comfortable position of victim. You take full responsibility for your outcomes, which means you also bear the full weight of your failures. This is why most people unconsciously choose mediocrity, not because they don't want success, but because they're not willing to sacrifice the psychological comfort of having someone else to blame. Mediocrity comes with built-in excuses. Excellence comes with nowhere to hide. What excuses are you protecting that are keeping you from the life you really want? What comfortable stories are you telling yourself about why you can't achieve what you dream of achieving? The truth is, your goals are not asking you to sacrifice who you are. They're asking you to sacrifice who you've settled for being. There's a moment that comes to everyone who's ever attempted something significant. It's the moment when the initial excitement has worn off, when the reality of what you've committed to becomes clear, when the mountain you decided to climb reveals itself to be higher and steeper than it appeared from the valley below. This is the moment when most people turn back. The aspiring writer faces this moment somewhere around page 50 of what was supposed to be a novel. The blank page stares back at her like an accusation. The words that flowed so easily in her imagination now feel forced and clumsy on paper. Her family asks when she'll be done, when she'll get back to normal life. Publishers send rejection letters that feel like personal attacks on her worth as a human being. She sacrifices the illusion that talent is enough. She sacrifices the fantasy that inspiration will carry her through. She discovers that writing isn't about waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect idea. It's about sitting down at the desk every day, especially on the days when she doesn't feel like it, especially when the words come slowly and sound wrong. But the deepest sacrifice she makes is this: she gives up the right to quit and still respect herself. Once you commit fully to something that matters, casual failure becomes impossible. Not because success is guaranteed, but because you can no longer live with the person you'd become if you gave up without giving everything you had. This is the crossroads where character is forged. Not in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet hours when no one would know if you cut corners, when no one would blame you for doing just enough to get by. The choice you make in these moments doesn't just determine whether you'll achieve your goal. It determines who you'll become in the process of pursuing it. Watch a master craftsman at work and you'll see something remarkable. Every movement is deliberate. Every cut is precise. He doesn't hurry, even when time is short. He doesn't take shortcuts, even when no one would notice. He sacrificed the luxury of careless work. Once you've tasted the satisfaction of creating something truly excellent, average becomes intolerable. This craftsman didn't start with such high standards. He developed them through thousands of small choices, each one a decision to do it right rather than do it fast. He sacrificed the immediate gratification of finishing quickly for the long-term satisfaction of finishing well. And somewhere along the way, these small sacrifices transformed not just his work, but his entire relationship with himself. He learned that self-respect isn't something you're born with or something others give you. It's something you earn, one choice at a time, by keeping the promises you make to yourself when no one else is listening. Consider the mother who decides to go back to school while working full-time and raising 3 children. She doesn't just sacrifice sleep, though she gets precious little of it. She doesn't just sacrifice leisure time, though her idea of relaxation becomes studying at the kitchen table after everyone else has gone to bed. She sacrifices something much more fundamental: the right to feel sorry for herself. When you choose to pursue something difficult, you surrender the comfort of complaint. You can't simultaneously play the victim and play to win. You can't blame circumstances while also taking responsibility for changing them. She sacrifices the sympathetic nods she might get for accepting her limitations and trades them for the isolated struggle of refusing to accept them. Her friends don't understand why she's making life so hard for herself. Her family doesn't understand why what she has isn't enough. But she's discovered something they haven't: the difference between surviving and creating. Most people spend their lives reacting to circumstances. She's decided to create new circumstances. This requires sacrificing one of humanity's most cherished illusions, that we're powerless to change our situation. When you admit you have the power to change things, you also admit responsibility for not changing them sooner. You sacrifice the comfortable position of victim for the demanding role of creator. But here's what happens when you make these sacrifices consistently over time. They stop feeling like sacrifices. They become investments. The early mornings stop feeling like punishment and start feeling like opportunity. The discipline stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like freedom. The effort stops feeling like burden and starts feeling like privilege. The person you become through the process of sacrifice is worth more than any external achievement, because achievements can be taken away, lost, or forgotten. But the person who was forged in the fire of deliberate sacrifice, who learned to do hard things when they didn't feel like it, who discovered they could trust themselves to keep their own promises, that person can never be taken from you. What promises have you made to yourself that you've been breaking? What small sacrifices have you been avoiding that would start building the person you want to become? There's a transformation that happens when you've been sacrificing long enough, consistently enough, that something inside you shifts. The young man who once dreaded his early morning runs now finds himself restless if he misses them. The woman who forced herself to read one chapter of personal development each night now feels incomplete without learning something new each day. What once required tremendous willpower now flows naturally. But this transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without cost. There's a period, sometimes lasting months or years, where you live suspended between who you were and who you're becoming. You've sacrificed your old identity but haven't yet fully grown into your new one. This is the most dangerous time, because it's when most people convince themselves the sacrifice isn't worth it. The apprentice blacksmith stands at his forge, his arms aching from hours of hammering, sweat stinging his eyes, watching the master create beautiful ironwork that seems to flow effortlessly from his hands. The apprentice doesn't see the 20 years of mistakes, The thousands of pieces that ended up in the scrap pile, the nights when the master went home frustrated and questioning his chosen path. All the apprentice sees is the gap between where he is and where he wants to be. He doesn't yet understand that this gap isn't a problem to be solved quickly. It's a space to be lived in, learned from, grown through. The sacrifice isn't just in the doing, it's in the waiting, in the slow transformation that happens so gradually you can barely notice it from day to day. But one morning something changes. The hammer feels different in his hands. The metal responds to his touch in ways it never did before. He creates something that surprises even him with its beauty. And he realizes that all those hours of practice, all those failed attempts, all those moments when he wanted to quit, they weren't just preparation for this moment. They were this moment. The sacrifice was the achievement. This is what separates those who reach their big goals from those who abandon them. They understand that the sacrifice isn't the price you pay to get what you want. The sacrifice is what you want. The person you become through the process of disciplined pursuit is the real prize. Think about the businessman who decides to build something meaningful rather than just profitable. He could take shortcuts. He could cut corners on quality to increase margins. He could treat employees as expenses rather than investments. He could focus solely on quarterly results rather than long-term value creation. Many of his competitors do exactly that. But he's made a different choice. He's sacrificed the quick win for the sustainable victory. He's sacrificed the approval of those who measure success only in immediate financial returns. He's sacrificed the easy path for the right path, even when the right path is longer, harder, and lonelier. Years later, when his business has become a model for others, when his employees speak of their work with pride rather than resignation, when his customers become ambassadors rather than just buyers, people will call it luck. They'll say he was in the right place at the right time. They won't see the thousands of small decisions, the daily sacrifices of expedience for excellence, the countless moments when he chose the harder right over the easier wrong. But here's the beautiful truth about sacrifice. It's never really about what you give up. It's about what you make room for. When you sacrifice mediocrity, you make room for excellence. When you sacrifice immediate gratification, you make room for lasting satisfaction. When you sacrifice the comfort of staying who you are, you make room for the joy of becoming who you're meant to be. The farmer standing in his field at dawn, the one we met at the beginning, understands this. His neighbors see him working harder than necessary and think he's missing out on life. But he's not missing out on life. He's creating a life worth living. Every early morning, every careful decision, every refusal to settle for good enough, these aren't sacrifices he's making despite wanting to be happy. These are the very things that make him happy. He's discovered what few people ever learn, that the highest form of happiness doesn't come from having your desires fulfilled. It comes from becoming the kind of person whose desires are worth fulfilling. He sacrificed the shallow satisfaction of wanting things for the deep satisfaction of becoming worthy of them. And this is the final, most important sacrifice of all, giving up the belief that happiness comes from getting what you want. True happiness comes from wanting what you get when you become the person your goals require you to be. The goal was never really the goal. The goal was always the person you'd have to become to achieve it. So the question isn't whether you're willing to sacrifice for your big goals. The question is whether you're willing to sacrifice for the person those big goals will make you become, because in the end, that person is the only thing you'll truly keep.